Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019. Time for our first live show of the new month. Welcome to September. Yesterday, of course, was perfectly adequate, I think. Welcome to September. A September 2nd show that we had pre-recorded so that I could spend the day driving back and forth and helping clean out a house. It sounds like so much fun. Yeah, there was some family business to take care of, and we're not cleaning it out entirely here, but trying to cut down on the effluvia of many decades spent in, for the in-laws, spent in their house, trying to manage things so that they can keep a handle on, like I said, the flotsam and jetsam of life. Many things we had to pack up, clean off, pack up, take home, take with us, find new homes for, fun thing to do on Labor Day. It wasn't exactly labor, but a labor of love. Yes, we can call it that. We're back at the microphone, of course, after, a quick ride down and back, some crazy weather, not as bad as they're getting down with this hurricane. If it finally hurry up and get here, we'd appreciate getting it all over with, if you don't mind very much. I understand the storm is stalled somewhat and getting ready to turn up the East Coast. And part of the weirdness of the weekend was the president arguing with the National Weather Service and the news broadcasting outfits that reported that he was doing so. He tweeted out some kind of a warning early in the weekend. I guess he thought he was being, a responsible president. This was his idea of being a responsible president. When, of course, he had canceled his trip to Poland, during which he was supposed to commemorate the 80th anniversary, I guess, of the invasion of Poland by the Nazi regime, and I guess shortly thereafter, or exactly the same day, I think, if I remember the history correctly, the Soviet Union as well. I don't know how they feel about the day, how they look back on it in Poland. I assume it's not exactly a joyous event, although they were in the end. I suppose they regard themselves as having been freed from Nazi oppression in exchange for Soviet oppression after the war. So I don't know exactly how they take it in the inside Poland. But at any rate, I believe the president must have gotten a memo that said, do not congratulate Poland over their involvement or their invasion in World War II. But he went ahead and did it anyway. Canceled his trip there. Why commemorate World War II, after all, when you can send the vice president and go golfing instead? Oh, P.S., I'm supposed to be here monitoring the hurricane. So the whole weekend was spent on the golf course with the claim constantly being put out by the White House press shop that the president was being updated on the storm hourly. And then, of course, he had to get updated hourly on the mass shooting going on in Texas, also hourly. I don't know whether he got one on the half hour and one at the top of the hour or what. My suspicion is that he got neither, of course. And then I guess he felt like he was going to be attacked for being out of touch during a hurricane, so he tweeted out some warnings to people, and he said, look out to, Georgia and Carolinas and Florida. And I guess he must have looked at a map and seen that Alabama borders Florida to the northwest, and said, and Gulf Coast and everything is usually in danger at some point during hurricane season. So he tweeted out that Alabama should look out for damage from the storm too. But the National Weather Service in Alabama was quick to point out, no, the storm is expected to stay over the Atlantic and far enough from the coast anyway. It's not supposed to come just barreling across Florida and head into the Gulf or up into Alabama. There was no danger to Alabama, and in fact, most of the coastal states affected were giving out warnings or evacuating people only from east of Route 95. So no serious storm effects maybe no storm effects at all to be expected in Alabama. But so then he went with the, well, better safe than sorry sort of excuse. And then now he's fighting with people over it. I guess he was angry at Jonathan Karl from ABC News yesterday because ABC News said that the president tweeted out that Alabama should look out for the hurricane, and the National Weather Service says, no, nothing doing in Alabama. Don't worry about that. And you don't want to panic people. I don't know whether there was any sort of widespread panic going on in Alabama. Even when you tell people that they're under mandatory evacuation, they sometimes don't go. But you can usually count on one or two people panicking, and when people panic, bad things happen. So you could put people in danger by giving out the wrong information. And rather than saying, I'm sorry, I originally thought that the storm might drift westward, but it turns out I am assured by the National Weather Service that's not the case. Rest easy, Alabama. Instead, he's fighting with people over calling him out for giving out the wrong information. And, I was told originally. So you can't just say, that's not actually true. No, not Donald Trump. So there you have it. That's where we are over the weekend. It's great to have a president who's pretty much incompetent at every possible job. Lots of photos and video of him swinging the clubs in Sterling, Virginia, the Sterling, Virginia Golf Club, where he decided to make merry for the holiday weekend. Not New Jersey, because, of course, he was monitoring the storm. And I think he may have, what did we say yesterday? He flew out to Camp David, and then on Friday night, and then helicoptered to the golf course on Saturday morning. And I don't know whether he went back to Camp David or not. I think he did, but I think he only spent like a little bit of time there and then hustled back to the White House to make more mistakes about what was happening in the hurricane. And they've pretty much forgotten all about the mass shooting thing. You know how those things come and go these days, like flash floods are mass shootings. Okay, so here we are on Tuesday, our first live show for the month, and Daily Kos now being live. I bring you Bill's tweet from Portland, Maine, where the hurricane is expected to reach, I would say, probably about May of next year. It's a very slow-moving storm. I don't think the maiden threat of the storm is due to arrive even in Florida for some time, and I think the Carolinas and Georgia are under evacuation orders on the coast starting tomorrow at noon, so this thing is really taking its time, but it is, as a result, I guess, it's really slamming the Bahamas. So all your offshore private bank accounts are being washed away. The big listenership who've got offshore funds hiding in the Bahamas, I'm sure, are scared to death. You can move it for secure and safekeeping to my Patreon account if you wish. I can't guarantee that the money comes back, but, who gets guarantees in life these days? What are you, dependent on the nanny state or something? Just move your gigantic offshore funds to, for all I know, Patreon is offshore. I have no idea. And, honestly, what's the difference? I don't know. Even when you flood the islands, the money is electronic, so don't worry about it. So give it a shot. Why not? Patreon.com/KagroX in case you're looking for a way to get rid of that offshore money or onshore it or possibly move it to another offshore haven for all I know. Wouldn't that be fantastic to find out that Patreon itself is in the Cayman Islands or something like that, and we're all guilty of the same sort of weird international money, if not laundering, finagling, certainly. That, I don't know. So we're going to all show up in the Pentagon Papers. I think I can keep you safe from that for the most part. Okay, so let's see. What are we doing today? Bill will tell us. Let's see. Kagro X, that's me again. I did it again. I'm hosting the show. Reports that President Trump is urging Idaho, New Mexico, Minnesota, and Poland to board up their windows. That would be a good idea. And take all other safety measures as Hurricane Dorian approaches. Probably. Why not? If you didn't name Poland, you would be accused of forgetting it. So you might as well just throw that one in there too. Okay. So everyone should board up their windows, particularly if Mike Pence is nearby. He went to Poland instead of the president. He's done with Poland. You saw all the major headlines about how things went in Poland. And off to Ireland, because as you know, you can't just fly from Poland to the United States, even if you have a private jet or an Air Force jet at your disposal. I'm not certain what he's doing. He's not certain what he's doing. So I guess that makes no difference. Neither one of us know what he's doing. Allegedly having some meetings with Irish officials, but once again, basing the U.S. operations for another visit to Ireland out of Doonbeg, where the president has a golf course, as opposed to Dublin, which is the actual capital of Ireland, and some considerable distance, opposite sides of the island, I think, between the two. And for some of the time, the vice president, I guess, is doing the Irish government the courtesy of shuttling his grifting ass all the way over across at our expense. And I don't know, I think he might even be, jumping by Air Force Two from one side of the island to the other. And he'll go to Dublin for some of the meetings, but for others, they're dragging the Irish officials across the island to go see him at the golf course. Now, there is the germ of an excuse in there. I guess the vice president claims to have distant relatives in Ireland and in the Doonbeg area. And I guess if I were vice president and stopping in Ireland because it's in between Poland and the United States, whatever. Well, I guess if I were vice president and I had relatives there, I would say, I'm taking a personal vacation and I'm flying over there at my own expense, or I'll reimburse if I can't go anywhere without using Air Force Two, or I'll wait until I'm not vice president anymore, or something like that. But I guess it might be nice to show up and visit the cousins with all the trappings of office, too. And so he's decided he'll visit his distant cousins there. And as long as you're going to be in Doonbeg, you might as well stay at my resort, offers the president, which I guess if you're really, really inclined to see things their way, you might think, if the vice president says, well, hey, I'll stop in Ireland, I'll do a little bit of business. We got business with the Irish government. I don't know what we have to do with the Irish government. We're buying, clotted cream or something from, I got no idea. And I'm sure we have something to work on with the Irish government. So you stop and you say, well, while I'm in Ireland, I'll visit my distant cousins. Okay, that's in Doonbeg. I know about that. It's famous. It's in the news because the president owns a club there and he grifted that whole deal last time. I'll go and see them. And I'm not a billionaire, or I don't pretend to be a billionaire, and it will be very expensive for me to reimburse the government for staying there, which I would have to do because, of course, it would be illegal for me to just simply take a personal vacation and make the government pay for it. But, of course, I don't know. I guess you could count on getting a pardon for yourself, so that is a fun possibility. Anyway, I guess you could see it this way if you chose. The president then says, well, you don't have, money to burn there, Mike. I'll tell you what, you're going to go visit Doonbeg. You might as well, why don't you stay at my place? I'll comp you. But, of course, one, the president isn't going to comp anybody anything. And two, I don't know, it might even create more problems to say, well, I'll comp you for it. Now you have a vice president accepting gifts, although honestly, accepting gifts from the president, who knows whether that's out of bounds or what. I'm sure it's against the rules, although I don't know how much more bribing of Mike Pence there is even possible to do from Donald Trump's perspective anyway. So he says, stay at my place, and they'll have a place to stay. And then, of course, then gives us the opportunity from the White House to make the claims that, the reason he's staying at Doonbeg at my place is that the Secret Service has approved it all because I stayed there once, and so they've set it up so they won't have to do any extra work setting up a new place with vice presidential level security because there's already, security at Doonbeg. And I don't know whether that was temporary or what. It creates all sorts of other problems to now insinuate that certain properties owned by the president are more secure and safer to stay in than others by virtue of some sort of imaginary Secret Service approval. But since it seems to be a significant part of the plan for the president to make claims like this so that Trump fans around the world will feel extra special about paying to stay at Trump properties, that's part of the whole goal of all this. It creates a whole new level of problem, corruption, grifting, emoluments, and difficulty of all sort. So I see from the Hill's report here that they're a good 180 miles from Dublin. So Pence staying at a Trump resort during a trip to Ireland despite being 180 miles away from scheduled meetings. That sounds like a fun commute for the people who have to do it without benefit of government aircraft. And let's see what they have to say, just so we can get a fix on who he's meeting with and where. Let's see. So the Hill's reporting on this one by Morgan Chalfant says he's staying at a Trump resort during an official trip to Ireland, though it's 180 miles away from Dublin, where he is participating in meetings. Blah, blah, blah. We know where he's staying. It's on the west coast of Ireland, Dublin, of course, being on the east. And he stayed over there on Monday, traveled by plane to Dublin for official meetings on Tuesday. So that's just a short hop, 180 miles for a jet, but okay. He'll travel back to Doonbeg following meetings in Dublin. Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, told reporters Tuesday morning that Pence was originally supposed to travel from Dublin to Doonbeg, where his family is from, with no back-and-forth flight, but a late change to his schedule forced them to readjust. What do you know? How odd. And a hotel in the Irish capital had not been vetted ahead of time by the Secret Service, because no president has ever been to Dublin before. They had done all the advance work, and the facility we knew was safe and protected, and if you're going to stay in the Doonbeg area, which you're not, with a footprint of our size, that is the one facility that can accommodate that, Short told reporters. So that's the way we went about changing travel for the week. That's just a bunch of gobbledygook, really. Short also said that President Trump didn't ask Pence to stay at his property, but suggested it. I don't think it was a request like a command, Short told reporters. I think it was a suggestion. It wasn't like a you must, it was like you have to. You have to stay at my place. Okay, well, whatever. I'm not... you knew this was going to happen, and there'll be no accounting for it, and we'll all move on from there as something else outrageous happens, and we forget all about these things. Okay, I can understand that. It doesn't excuse it, but there you have it. Oh, well, by the way, yes, another, again from the Hill, I guess, or the Hill being used as a bad example here again. I did see our good friend Barb tweeting this morning, or actually, I saw it this morning. She tweeted it last night. The Hill reporting with the headline, Trump lashes out over reports he falsely claimed Dorian would hit Alabama. And he did falsely claim that Dorian would hit Alabama, but even there, they give him a break, right? The headline, he lashes out over reports that he falsely claimed it. Well, he did falsely claim it. The reports were true. Why couldn't the headline, as she says here, say Trump lashes out over being accurately quoted? Another good point. And, another of a million examples of the papers taking it easy on the president, because I guess they're just tired or afraid of beating him up even more. Okay, let's see. Other fun things to catch up on. I saw yesterday the Washington Post reporting that, the Congress coming back from their 6-week recess. You'd think they had been prorogued or something, but that's not in fact the case. They are on their way back, and as I saw Atrios tweeting Riley this morning, I hope they're ready to resist, #resist, after their 6-week vacation. I do feel like, and I think they knew this would happen, they've lost a considerable amount of their momentum. since, for instance, hosting Robert Mueller for hearings, which generated some considerable interest. But you may have noticed the president wasn't immediately impeached, and so everybody went on a 6-week vacation. And we got outraged about other things. There were plenty of other impeachable offenses committed during the break, but no Congress here to take care of that business. Though I do think during the break we did witness that fundamental shift where the number of House Democrats supporting opening an impeachment inquiry, even though we did hear before the break that it was the opinion of the Judiciary Committee that such hearings were in fact underway, we now have a considerable number of Democrats, even more than a majority of the caucus, now in favor. And you can begin to see a change, a subtle change in the tenor of statements coming out of the Speaker's office about it. I think she's more or less acknowledging that they're going to be forced into acknowledging more widely that they're involved in impeachment-focused hearings, if not an impeachment inquiry directly, even though Jerry Nadler has given away the game. Anyway, they are coming back with new plans. And this is why I grabbed the Washington Post piece here by Rachel Bate and Tom Hamburger, entitled Congressional Democrats Plan to Launch Inquiry into Trump's Alleged Role in Scheme to Silence Affair Accusations. Going to take a closer look at that. This is not news. We've heard all about the affairs. We've heard all about the payoffs. We even heard that the Mueller team investigated, and that's the reason why Michael Cohen is sitting in jail right now. But they didn't really reach a satisfying conclusion and an explanation of all aspects of what went on. The Mueller team did what they needed to do to lock up Cohen and hand the keys of a almost fully finished investigation over to Congress. And lots of people, as we recall, what can we say? I mean, we might even have to say imagined that it was Robert Mueller's plan to hand over an indictment report. Essentially, here is what you should be impeaching the president for. And you can, I suppose you can embellish things a little bit more with more investigation. But here's what I found. It's impeachable. You can take the ball and run with it. So they are going to do that. House Democrats, the report says, plan to make President Trump's alleged involvement in a 2016 scheme to silence 2 women who claimed they had affairs with him, a major investigative focus this fall. Picking up where federal prosecutors left off in a case legal experts say could have led to additional indictments. So I guess that'll be up to, I don't know who, Congress, either in impeachment proceedings, depending on who the people are who should have been indicted, or handing it back to the Justice Department for them to bury and F up so that we can impeach the people who screw that up, I suppose. The House Judiciary Committee is preparing to hold hearings and call witnesses involving the hush money payments to ex-Playboy model Karen McDougal and adult film star Stormy Daniels as soon as October, according to people familiar with the plans who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe internal discussions. Not internal to one person, hopefully. That would be really difficult to even call a discussion at all, but okay. Hopefully people have been speaking aloud about it. We're just not allowed to find out who was speaking aloud about it. Democrats say they believe there is already enough evidence to name Trump as a co-conspirator in the episode that resulted in his former attorney, Michael Cohen, pleading guilty to 2 campaign finance charges. Cohen, who is serving a 3-year prison sentence for those counts and other crimes, testified under oath that Trump directed the payments that helped him land behind bars. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan also described Trump's alleged role in the scheme, referring to him in court papers as Individual One. Everyone remembers that's actually where this came from, yes? But They concluded their investigation this summer without bringing any additional charges. And you may recall from the hearings that is largely believed to be because they were operating under the assumption that the DOJ policy and the OLC memo are, in fact, valid and binding, and that you can't indict a sitting president. So they indicted everyone else that they could and handed the only body with authority to exact any punishment whatsoever on a sitting president, the Congress, the keys. So in October, not May, not June, not July, not August, not September, by the way, but October, they'll begin on this task, I suppose. The hush money inquiry will open a new chapter in the House's months-long consideration of whether to draft articles of impeachment against the president. They should. More than 130 House Democrats have called for an official impeachment inquiry to begin, although House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has cautioned that trying to remove Trump would be divisive and politically risky without public support. They have it. They're just pretending that they don't. Okay. The new congressional inquiry will reopen questions about the extent of Trump's involvement in the episode and whether he would have been charged if not for Justice Department opinions that a sitting president cannot be indicted. The fingerprints are all over this one. It's not like a big mystery, said Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, a member of the Judiciary panel. As with the evidence of presidential obstruction of justice, the conclusion seems inescapable, that Trump would have been tried had he been anybody else. And now it's left to Congress again to figure out what to do with the law-breaking and apparent impunity of the president. Trump, his aides and attorneys have made, I've read this wrong here, but you know what I'm saying here. Trump, his aides and attorneys have made contradictory statements about the president's knowledge of the payments, but his lawyers have repeatedly denied that Trump committed wrongdoing. I've committed wrong reading, but we'll be back to try again in a minute. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. It turns out that it was 2 minutes that we were going to take to try and get the reading right. Let's see. We're actually about halfway through the piece here. We might as well continue just to get back on track, as Congress will have to do as well. Where did we leave off? Oh, yes. His lawyers had repeatedly denied that Trump committed wrongdoing. No campaign violations were engaged in by the president, said Jay Sekulow, Trump's personal attorney, of course. Trump's previous attorney sitting in jail for not committing any of those campaign violations, he says, at the president's direction. But okay, we'll find out. As part of the probe, Democrats plan to explore whether the investigation was stymied or obstructed. It was. That was everything that Robert Mueller was telling us, but okay. I guess we'll go find out whether that was the case. Read the report. The answer is yes. The Judiciary Committee is also considering as a potential witness David Pecker. Remember him? The chairman and CEO of American Media Incorporated, the parent company of the National Enquirer, which admitted making the payment to McDougal, which really, all by itself, like, why are you involved at all? It must be a payoff scheme. It has to be. There's no reason why a newspaper would be making these payments if it weren't. So, terrific. That wraps up the case for us, and everybody goes to jail. Except the sitting president, who has to be impeached instead. AMI complied with a document request Democrats made earlier this year. That's nice of them. Giving the committee all communications it previously turned over to law enforcement. According to the people familiar with the inquiry, a lawyer for Pecker, Elkan Abramowitz, declined to comment. AMI declined to comment as well. And that's the end of that section. There's a little bit more here, but I just want to observe here. AMI complied with the document request Democrats made earlier this year, giving the committee all communications it previously turned over to law enforcement. Not conclusive here because it's a voluntary release of the documents to Congress, but it's just interesting. I wanted to lay it alongside the claims that the Trump White House is making in other cases, challenging the validity of congressional subpoenas under the theory that answering congressional subpoenas is what the congressional subpoenas are doing is attempting to exercise law enforcement authority, and that law enforcement is a task that is the prerogative of the executive branch of government, and that the legislative branch has no business exercising law enforcement authorities, and that's and for that reason, there's, in other words, no such thing essentially as a congressional subpoena. This, of course, is a bit of a novel theory, and it's sort of long been assumed that as part of the system of checks and balances that exist as between the three co-equal branches of government as we're taught to conceive of them, there are some hybrid areas, some places where each branch exercises a few, limited in scope very often, of the powers usually primarily delegated to a different branch for the purpose of being able to check those branches. And so operations like impeachment, which are both law enforcement and quasi-judiciary in nature. That means there would be a quasi-executive function to it and a quasi-judicial function to it. And that's part of the reason that there are such checks. It's part of the reason why Republicans and conservatives are frequently complaining about legislating from the bench when judges find certain statutes unconstitutional and negate them, or in some cases impose solutions that they think are dictated by the requirements of law, but which approach in nature, I guess sometimes, the level of what conservatives consider to be legislative solutions by meting out certain or requiring certain standards be met in order to satisfy the court. And they are sometimes quasi-legislative in nature, but this is one of the many places in which the various branches can reach out and acquire some limited amount of the power of the others to make sure that the right things happen. If the legislature hasn't gone far enough, for instance, in prescribing a remedy that the Constitution would appear to demand, such as, say, equality of resources and services as between the public schooling opportunities available for white students and students of color. If the legislature doesn't have the fortitude to demand that they be brought up to par, the judiciary sometimes will say, well, it's a demand of the Constitution. And that gives us the opportunity to say, we'll order a settlement that creates more, as close to parity as we think we can do. It would be certainly better if the legislature got its act together and legislated a solution to this inequality. But in the absence of their willingness to do so, the demands of the Constitution are clear, and we order it to happen. Quasi-legislative in nature, but within the prerogative of the judiciary. We have this happen all the time. And there are examples, plenty of examples of it happening, of executive branches being able to accrue to themselves some of the powers traditionally thought of as being judicial or legislative, executive orders, etc. And they're afforded latitude like that all the time. Anyway, I just bring that up to illustrate the elementary foolishness, I guess, of standing there and saying, no, it's a very clear line, and only the executive can utilize executive powers, period. And any encroachment in executive power, or what's traditionally been executive power by any other branch, is facially invalid, is just a total it's a total misreading of our actual history. Whether or not they will succeed in convincing judges and indeed justices of the Supreme Court that it never should have been part of our history and that those were mistakes when they've happened, and going forward it should never be allowed, is a totally different question. Anyway, I guess this is all a waste of time because this doesn't bear directly on it. No court is at this point ordering AMI to give the communications previously turned over to law enforcement, the executive, to the Congress, the legislative branch. But they have no difficulty in turning it over to them. There's no skin off their nose in doing so. And so I guess the very weakest possible demonstration, but a demonstration nonetheless, of the belief, at least at AMI, that Congress does have some quasi-law enforcement interest in getting a hold of these things, and they would have no problem having handed them over to law enforcement, handing them over to Congress as well. Now, had a court ordered it, that would be even stronger evidence that, no, it's a legitimate function of the Congress. But we'll get that soon enough, too, if things go according to plan and judges sort of stick to judicial canon versus trying to invent some new doctrine on behalf of the Trump administration later on. All right, continuing then with the Washington Post's actual story, because this would have been a very long sidebar for them. The conclusion of the campaign finance investigation this summer surprised some former federal prosecutors and legal experts who noted that other participants in the alleged scheme, remember the scheme? It's a story about the scheme, to pay off Karen McDougal, Stormy Daniels, etc., to cover up the affairs. So where were we? The conclusion of the campaign finance investigation this summer surprised some former federal prosecutors and legal experts who noted that other participants in the alleged scheme were granted immunity or non-prosecution agreements, which often signal that the case is focused on additional targets. It's inconceivable Michael Cohen acted alone. What happened? Said Duncan Levin, a former prosecutor for the Justice Department and Manhattan District Attorney's Office. When you have one of the most important, sensitive investigations into the president and his family and his company, and then when you unexpectedly drop it, it is going to raise a lot of questions. A Justice Department spokesman in Washington referred questions, I guess those are the ones that are being raised, a lot of them, to the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York, which declined to comment. It remains to be seen how far congressional Democrats will be able to get in their inquiry. So far, Trump and his administration have succeeded in blocking many of the House oversight investigations, refusing to provide information and challenging subpoenas in court. When the House returns to session next week, the Judiciary Panel plans to continue focusing on 5 episodes of potential obstruction of justice by the president, outlined in Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III's lengthy report this spring. Democrats have argued that Trump would have been charged with obstruction in those 5 instances were he not the president. Now, quick reminder that this piece, just to be clear on the schedule here, is dated September 2nd. That's yesterday. So when they refer to Congress coming back next week, that's not an article from last week saying they're coming back this week, but an article from this week saying they're coming back next week, and there you have it. Unless you're listening to this report late as a podcast, we'll expect them back then, I guess, next week. Okay. The hush money payments represent a sixth instance of potentially impeachable presidential misbehavior, they say. I'd say it's probably about 56 here, but all right, who knows how they're counting. Although, maybe this next couple paragraphs is about how they're counting. The scheme, now, I guess we'll just focus on that, began in the final months of the 2016 campaign when Cohen has said there was building fear in Trump's inner circle that McDougal and Daniels would go public with allegations that they had sexual encounters with Trump years earlier. Cohen told prosecutors that in coordination with and at the direction of Trump, he worked with Pecker to pay $150,000 to McDougal as part of a catch-and-kill operation. He also said he worked in coordination, that's a quote, with the then GOP presidential candidate, that's Trump, to arrange a $130,000 payment to Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford. Why McDougal got the extra $20K, I'm not sure, but there you have it. Trump and his aides initially denied knowing about the payments and then offered shifting explanations for their purpose. So that's obstruction and perjury right there all by itself. We have no knowledge of any of this, spokeswoman Hope Hicks said in November of 2016. How did she do it? She lied. That's how. After the Wall Street Journal reported on the payment to McDougal, after the Journal reported on the existence of the Daniels payment early last year, a reporter on Air Force One asked the president, "Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?" "No," Trump responded. "Then why did Michael Cohen make the payment if there was no truth to her allegations?" As you usually say, a reporter asked. "You'll have to ask Michael Cohen," Trump said. So, just to be clear here, the allegation from Trump is that he didn't have an affair with Stormy Daniels and that he has no idea why Michael Cohen would pay Stormy Daniels $130,000. You'll have to ask him. And then they asked him, and then Michael Cohen said, well, the reason I paid her $130,000 was because the president had a sexual affair with her and wanted to pay her $130,000 as part of an agreement to get her to shut up about that. Oh, well, okay, you'll have to go to jail about that. Well, what are you going to do about it? The president doing that? We'll get to that in October. You go to jail now. In October, we'll start asking some questions about it. The following month, however, Trump attorney Rudolph W. Giuliani, he's really good, said that the president reimbursed Cohen for the $130,000 paid to Daniels, adding that Trump, quote, didn't know about the specifics of it as far as I know, which is also an amazing statement. So, did you have an affair with her? No. Well, then why did Michael Cohen pay her $130,000? You'll have to ask him. Well, how about if we ask Rudy Giuliani? I don't know. You could try it. See what he says. All right, Rudy, why did this happen? What's up with the $130,000 that Michael Cohen paid to Stormy Daniels? And Giuliani's big fix for it is, well, Cohen didn't really pay her $130,000. Trump paid Cohen. After he paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, Trump gave him that money back. And why did he do that? He doesn't know. That's the answer of Mr. Great Businessman who's going to watch the checkbook of America for us. Okay? I can see they're trying to duck responsibility for this stuff, but it doesn't work with the rest of their stories. Anyway, Cohen said in federal court and before Congress that Trump directed the payments. That'll pretty much do it. In testimony before the House Oversight Committee in February, Cohen said Trump had assured him in an Oval Office meeting, can you believe it? That he would take care of Cohen's debt related to Daniels, which Cohen had financed through a line of credit. Cohen displayed what he said were reimbursement checks for the $130,000 payment to Daniels, one dated August 1st, 2017, which he said was signed by the president, the other from March 17th, 2017, which he said was signed by Donald Trump Jr., the president's son, and Alan Weisselberg, the Trump Organization's chief financial officer. Interesting. I am going to jail in part because of my decision to help Mr. Trump hide that payment from the American people before they voted a few days later, he said. Okay, done. Federal prosecutors also implicated Trump in the hush money scheme, noting in court filings before Cohen's sentencing that the former Trump lawyer admitted, with respect to both payments, that he acted in coordination with and at the direction of Individual One, a reference to the president. The payments, and by the way, in case you forgot all of that, if you were wondering, how do we know for sure that Individual One is the president? It certainly sounds like the president. You'll recall, I believe that in the indictment papers there, they discuss Individual One, and then they say Individual One who later became president of the United States, which is about the most underhanded way of not keeping his identity a secret as I could imagine, when you're dealing with a sitting president, after all. But I got a big kick out of it, and in case you forgot about it, I thought I'd remind you. The payments essentially functioned as an in-kind donation. That's the big campaign finance violation here. An in-kind donation to Trump's presidential campaign, prosecutors said. The money paid to McDougal by National Enquirer's parent company, AMI, violated a ban on corporate contributions, while the money that Cohen directed to Daniels constituted an excessive campaign contribution, they alleged. Prosecutors also released a non-prosecution agreement struck with AMI in which the company said it knowingly acted, quote, in concert with Trump's campaign to silence the women and did not notify the Federal Election Commission of the election-related payments. In other words, they were saying, the campaign asked us to pass this money on to Stormy Daniels. That would inure to the benefit of Trump, the candidate, and the campaign on his behalf. And anything that tends to inure to their benefit would have to be declared as a donation to them or an in-kind donation to them, and corporations wouldn't be allowed to make such donations to a presidential candidate, but we did. And that's a violation of campaign finance law, and that's why we're in trouble. Similarly, although Michael Cohen was acting as an individual, there are individual caps, limits on the amount of money individuals can give to any one campaign, and $130,000 exceeds it. So, two different angles of campaign finance law violation there, but both quite right, and in keeping with the way we have interpreted campaign finance law for everybody else, pretty much for all time. Prosecutors, they also released this non-prosecution agreement. That's how we know about all this stuff. Prosecutors said AMI officials knew expenditures by corporations made for purposes of influencing an election and in coordination with, or at least at the request of, a candidate or campaign are unlawful, the agreement said. So even that little escape hatch that people have frequently... I didn't know it was against the law. I don't know how that suddenly became an escape hatch. We were always taught that that wasn't one. But that's for little people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't come into play because they admit that they knew. The document acknowledged that AMI's main purpose was, quote, to suppress the model's story, this time McDougal, so as to prevent it from influencing the election, the agreement said. This was an agreement basically to plead guilty to this stuff in exchange for non-prosecution. As part of the deal, AMI agreed to cooperate with any law enforcement agency pursuing the matter and to train executives and editorial employees on election laws and their application to media operations, or corporations for that matter. But the word they use is operations. So, interesting. The AMI agrees to cooperate with any law enforcement agency, and they are now opting to voluntarily comply with the request from Congress, even though it's not a law enforcement agency if you listen to the president's attorneys. But they're done listening to the president's attorneys, and of course it's no skin off their nose, so why not cooperate? In addition, federal prosecutors secured the cooperation of Weisselberg, who testified before a grand jury, but no further charges were filed. In July, the federal judge supervising the case, William H. Pauley III, everybody's a third today, said that the government has effectively concluded its investigations of who, besides Cohen, was involved. That's interesting. The government, in this case, meaning, I guess, the executive branch, the Department of Justice, and the special counsel's office. But the government hasn't concluded its investigations because Congress is going to perhaps probe a little further. But that's not his concern. The Manhattan District Attorney picked up an aspect of the case, issuing subpoenas in August to the Trump Organization about the money paid to Daniels as part of an inquiry into whether the Trump organization falsified business records. That would be another problem, and I guess one of interest to the state of New York. A lawyer for the Trump organization, Alan Futterfuss, remember him, declined to comment. Has he been representing Jared Kushner in all these things, or was he the one representing Donald Trump Jr. in some of his proceedings? I can't remember where Futterfuss actually was doing some overlapping work for one of the individuals involved. Maybe we can check that out at some future date if it becomes relevant. It remains unknown whether federal prosecutors would have sought to charge Trump if not for Justice Department legal opinions concluding that indicting a sitting president could interfere with the office's unique constitutional responsibilities. In part because of those opinions, Mueller decided that he could not even consider whether to charge Trump in his obstruction of justice inquiry. Is this an accurate reading of things, that it remains unknown? I know that Mueller said as much and then tried to back off saying it at some point in the subsequent to that. And I guess that's why people say it remains unknown. But, I mean, he was pretty clear about it, and then his backing away from it, even his backing away from it wasn't really backing away from it. I forget the exact nuance of it, but I do recall when we discussed it on the air last time that, it was not a thorough repudiation by any means, and maybe not a repudiation at all of the idea that they weren't charging the president because of that directive. Okay. In part because of those opinions, Mueller decided that he could not even consider. So I think that was it. That was the nuance of it. Well, did you, in fact, not charge the president? This was pretty incredible. Did you decide not to charge the president because of the DOJ policy that says you can't indict him? And the answer was ultimately, well, no, the policy, in fact, caused us not to even ask the question of whether or not we couldn't indict him. So we never reached the conclusion that we couldn't indict him because we never even asked the question of whether we could not indict him, which really is a distinction without a difference. If you won't even allow yourself to ask the question because of the policy, then yes, you have answered the hypothetical question based on the policy. There's no other conclusion you can reach but that you can't indict the president while he's sitting in office if you are also of the opinion that you're not even permitted to ask the question. If you're not permitted to ask the question, you cannot conclude that it would be okay because the question has never been posed. So it's just another route to the same conclusion that the president cannot be charged while sitting in office because of this policy. I mean, it's dumb to say, well, I never even asked the question, except if you're trying to lay out, purposefully a distinction without a difference. At least in this case, I suppose it's possible to come up with a hypothetical wherein it makes a difference whether or not you ask the question or not. But I can't think of one offhand. All right. Phew, where were we here? New York University law professor Stephen Gillers called it, quote, troublesome that the campaign finance case ended without providing more answers, arguing that it would disserve the public interest if the Justice Department did not eventually disclose who else was party to Michael Cohen's crime. There is clear evidence that one or more people participated in Cohen's crime, he said. We just don't know who they are and whether they are subject to investigation and could still be prosecuted. Carl Sandstrom, a former member of the Federal Election Commission, which I guess we could say a former member of the body formerly known as the Federal Election Commission, but which is now, the former Election Commission is in remission at the moment. There isn't one, or at least not a functioning one. So we'll just say there isn't one. Sandstrom said that based on his review of the matter, prosecutors in Manhattan had an exceedingly strong case. He questioned why they did not pursue others involved. They saw fit to put Michael Cohen in jail. Well, no, federal prosecutors in Manhattan saw fit to put Michael Cohen in jail. State prosecutors in Manhattan have not yet seen fit, but some nebulous they saw fit to put Michael Cohen in jail. Why aren't the people who authorized and paid for this culpable? They are. They just haven't gotten around to it yet. In announcing the conclusion of the investigation, Pauley immediately released documents that were previously under seal, saying every citizen should have an opportunity to scrutinize the materials in a case of national importance. House Democrats saw his comments as an indication that they should pick up the investigation, according to aides familiar with their investigative plans. The Judiciary panel is now eyeing Pecker. I quit the radio show. It's done for the day. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the Judiciary panel is now eyeing Pecker. And, it's all good. As far as I'm concerned, if that's what you want to spend your time eyeing, I'm not going to judge you on it. Anyway, that's not the whole sentence, of course. Oh, but a big buzzer goes off reminding me it's time for yet another break soon. Okay, so they're now eyeing Pecker and AMI, you see, as potential sources of new information. The committee this summer authorized subpoenas for Pecker. I'm 12 years old. And he's a close Trump confidant, they're telling us, I'm sure, that Trump and Pecker talk all the time. And National Enquirer editor Dylan Howard, whose name is not in any way hilarious, who also cooperated with federal prosecutors. That's fantastic. Okay, the only way this could get better is to have some other people, other members of the team over at AMI have names that are slang terms for parts of the sexual anatomy. Okay, we'll see what we can come up with after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's just get it out of the way now. Pecker. Okay, thank you very much. I think that should get rid of the giggles for about 30 seconds. So everybody's eyeing Pecker, really, basically, at this point, as new sources of information. So I guess they'll call him to testify as well, even though all of the documentation was released by the judge. I'll be curious to see what else they can tell us and whether I believe they are disclosing everything. Or are they still on Team Trump secretly? Where were we? Documents released by Pauley show that after the Washington Post published a recording in October of 2016. Yes, that's when they published that recording. That would, of course, be the Access Hollywood tapes, in which Trump bragged about groping women. Really, so much more than groping women, but okay. Cohen exchanged, quote, a series, unquote, of messages and calls with Pecker, Howard, Trump, and Daniels' attorney, among others. The documents included notes of an FBI agent that stated, based on the timing of these calls and the content of the text messages and emails, I believe that at least some of these communications concerned the need to prevent Clifford from going public. And as I recall, there was some speculation at the time, and it might have been Empty Wheel speculating at the time, that it's not necessarily the case that the FBI's agent here was conclusively or was viewing the material entirely accurately. I mean, it was clearly a discussion about the need to prevent people from going public, but as I recall, there was some question and some ambiguity about the goings-on, and that there might be other women, or that B, the payment wasn't necessarily the payment being discussed wasn't necessarily the one that was meant to go to Clifford. But okay, I can't recall offhand what exactly that was. If you remember, drop me a line and we'll see if we can't remind other people about that. As part of the probe, Democrats are expected to put a spotlight on Trump's evolving explanations about what he knew of the scheme. According to people familiar with the strategy, They also hope to review a Justice Department decision to end the hush money query by pressing Attorney General William P. Barr about it directly in a future hearing. So that will be infuriating and disappointing is my prediction. But yeah, they, I guess at this point, have to go ahead with this and make that inquiry. So I guess I'm glad that it's underway, even if I have my doubts about it resulting in any of the things that it really, by rights, should bring about. All right, let's see. Checking in on some comments in my mentions and the KITM hashtag columns here. Who's asking this question? Is it Wouter Vanderhorst? Yes, our conspiracy theorist in chief, and he usually has some good ones to share with us. We have, let's see, the comment from earlier this morning was Pence's trip to Ireland already planned when Trump wimped out on Poland and sent Pence instead. Just how long was the Trump Doonbeg property blocked in advance to accommodate a VIP and entourage? That's an interesting question. Looking for people to make Freedom of Information Act requests of the State Department, including, several other of his investigative friends, the people at Crew, me, as a matter of fact. I won't be making any Freedom of Information Act requests myself, but a good question. Something worth wondering about, and I guess, we'll retweet it for everybody to read and think about. It's a good question, right? Originally, I guess the question, was Pence going to do any of this when it was Trump meant to go to Poland? I guess they could use that as an excuse, right? Well, it was last minute that he decided to send Pence to Poland instead. And after Pence found out he was being sent to Poland, he said, I might as well stop over in Ireland on the way. It's the natural, right? The natural thought, right? I'm going to Poland. I might as well stop in Doonbeg, Ireland, which is, on the flyover route from Poland. I don't even know if it really is, but it's close enough. And we'll throw that in there. And you have a golf course there? All right, I guess we'll stay. I guess you could say, okay, if he's going to visit, I want to visit Ireland. As long as I'm flying across the ocean, I want to stop in the middle in Ireland and visit some distant cousins who I've never visited in my life before when I had to pay for it. But now maybe I can get the government to pay for it. And, and then at that point, right, you might say, well, where are we going to put someone like the vice president if we haven't checked out a hotel in Dublin yet? And besides, he wants to be in Doonbeg. All right, fine, the Trump resort. And then you make up the story about, the Secret Service has totally outfitted Doonbeg for VIP visits at the drop of a hat. Whether they have or haven't, I don't know. If they haven't, then there was added expense. If they have, then the added expense came earlier, where the first time that Trump stopped there, and really how often is a presidential VIP going to stop in Doonbeg, Ireland? And all resources that were parked there at that point and that remained there would be, emoluments anyway. So, okay, it brings up a number of other stupid ideas that and opportunities for stealing federal money that you shouldn't put past this president, because he's going to take advantage of them. All right, let's see. We'll move on from there to other stories. That was a little bit longer than I thought, spending on the congressional inquiry, but it could be a pivotal one. And I guess that'll be the forum to watch if you, like me and Atrios, have your doubts about how much momentum for impeachment there really could be after a 6-week layoff. I guess that'll be the place that the pivot occurs, if it occurs at all. Okay, let's see. Other stories to share. This was an interesting and intriguing one here. I stored this one away over the weekend and didn't fit into yesterday's recording. Did you see this? It was also in the Washington Post. So if you're one of those people that gets the physical newspaper, you may have seen this thing. I guess one of the great disadvantages of not having the paper in hand and reading things online these days is you very often won't wander through the paper physically and discover other stories on your way through and learn new things by serendipity. I suppose, though, that's what all the various pop-ups and links that are on these pages are supposed to do. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but they don't work like paper. Anyway, you can rely instead on Twitter, where people will pique your interest with these things, which is what I do. This is the story of what happened when Trump visited the African American History Museum, according to its founding director. Peggy McGlone is the author of the piece, not the founding director. Rather, that is Smithsonian Secretary Lonnie G. Bunch III. And in his upcoming memoir, newly appointed Smithsonian Secretary Lonnie G. Bunch III describes the private tour he gave President Trump of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, recalling that Trump's reaction was interesting. Let me pause for just a second and point out here, he's newly appointed as Smithsonian Secretary, and yet he has something to say here which is critical of Trump. So, one, maybe Trump will be researching, can I fire the Smithsonian Secretary? And two, you might wonder, how did he end up as Smithsonian Secretary in the first place? My recollection is that the members of the board of the Smithsonian, and I guess the Smithsonian Secretary, I didn't realize they had a secretary per se, but I guess they do, is that the people who run the Smithsonian are, by statute, are nominated by members of Congress, and that I guess the majority and minority leader of the Senate and the Speaker of the House and minority leader of the House have the ability to put forward names, and I guess traditionally the president does the nominating, but he just chooses from the list that he's presented by members of Congress because ordinarily, who cares, right? Honestly, you presumably you want competent people running the Smithsonian, but it's not a big deal in the public mind, and I'm sure that it's used to pay off political supporters of one party or another or both from time to time, and that occasionally we put people who might not necessarily be the best choices out of the entire country in charge, but as long as they're not horribly incompetent, everything goes well. And it's a little plum for the political leaders in Congress to be able to hand out. And so it should come as no surprise to anyone that they have granted themselves the power to do this. So in other words, it may be the case that Lonnie G. Bunch III has become Smithsonian Secretary not because Donald Trump decided that's the guy I want, but because some leader somewhere in Congress was induced for some reason to offer up his name, and the president had no reason to say no. They went ahead and did that. And now the president will come to regret it and probably be scouring the books or asking Stephen Miller to find a way to fire the guy. Why? Because Lonnie Bunch, in his new memoir, describes the private tour he gave President Trump of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, recalling that Trump's reaction to the Dutch role, right, the Dutch role in the global slave trade was, right, drum roll, so he's basically saying, here's an exhibit laying out the Dutch role in the global slave trade was, they love me in the Netherlands, where they, are being accused of being slave traders here. Well, they love me there where they were slave traders. They're not now. They were then. Okay, but that was pretty remarkable, and I guess it stuck with Mr. Bunch that I could show the president the heart-rending exhibits about the brutality of the slave trade and how widespread it was, and his answer is, well, this has to do with me being a fantastic person and being loved around the world. Oh. Shortly before Trump took office in 2017, this is the backstory in the whole thing, his administration, which wasn't an administration yet, but a transition team, asked to visit the newly opened museum, according to Bunch's upcoming memoir, and if you want to buy it, it's entitled A Fool's Errand. Wow. A Fool's Errand, creating the National Museum of African American History and Culture in the age of Bush, Obama, and Trump. Wow. Bunch was the museum's founding director from 2005 until June, I guess, of this year, when he became the Smithsonian's secretary. The incoming president wanted to come on the holiday commemorating the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., according to the memoir, and you could see why he would want to do that. Oh, I need to do something, for the, as he would say, for the blacks who love me, on Martin Luther King Day. Their favorite day, I'm sure he thought to himself, right? Well, okay. It might be an appropriate day for anyone else to visit the museum, but he quickly came to understand, and credit to him for understanding this, that having the president-elect visit, or I guess at that point he might already be the president, either way, having a VIP like that visit on Martin Luther King Day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to give the full title there, would be very disruptive. Other people might want to visit the museum on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and they wouldn't be able to because the president was hogging it all for himself. So I give him credit for that. The administration also asked the museum be closed to the public during the visit, which is what they would normally have to do. The notion, though, that we could shut out visitors on the first King holiday since the opening of the museum was not something I could accept, Bunch writes. Another day was chosen. So it's not necessarily the case that the administration saw the folly of it, but rather that Bunch pointed it out. And they could have insisted, I guess, and said, screw you and everybody else, I demand it. But they didn't. So maybe if you're looking to give them credit somehow, you could do it that way. Among those who joined Trump were Ben Carson, bring me my black guy, a retired neurosurgeon who is featured in the museum, by the way, and who had been nominated to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Also brought along here, Senator Tim Scott, the other one that they've got, I guess. I mean, and this is the way that they're thinking here. Of course, it would have been a huge snub not to bring them, but you might also have invited some, I don't know. Well, if there were some white people that had some sort of helpful role in appropriating the money, you could bring them. But on the other hand, maybe this is the right list, right? Nobody else seemed to care about the thing. Why should we parade white people around and make it look like they gave a damn about opening this museum, besides the president? Okay, so, on second thought, I think it's entirely fine. Okay, so Ben Carson, Tim Scott, and King's niece, Alveda King. Bunch recalls hoping the visit, quote, would contribute to a broader understanding of race relations in America. I am ever the optimist. I guess hence the title here, A Fool's Errand. Before the president-elect arrived, his aides told Bunch that Trump, quote, was in a foul mood and that he did not want to see anything difficult, Bunch writes. Nevertheless, Bunch started the tour in the history galleries, which began with the global slave trade. I mean, that's not difficult, is it? I guess it would be challenging to, it's meant to be challenging to everybody. I mean, it's an in-depth discussion of the ramifications of the global slave trade, and they continue today. But anyway, it was not my job, he says, to make the rough edges of history smooth, even for the president, he writes. Trump greeted him warmly and expressed his wife's enjoyment of a tour she had with Sarah Netanyahu, wife of the Israeli prime minister, according to Bunch. Then they went into the galleries. The president paused in front of the exhibit to discuss the role of the Dutch in the slave trade, Bunch writes. As he pondered the label, I felt that maybe he was paying attention to the work of the museum. He quickly proved me wrong. As he turned from the display, he said to me, they love me in the Netherlands. All I could say was, let's continue walking. There is little I remember about the rest of the hour we spent together. I'd blot it out too. I was so disappointed in his response to one of the greatest crimes against humanity in history, he continues. Here was a chance to broaden the views and understanding of the incoming president, and I had been less successful than I had expected. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who attended the tour, said the administration wanted to visit the museum before it opened on Martin Luther King Jr. Day to avoid disrupting public access on a day they knew would have special meaning. He remembers the president was engaged and asked questions throughout the tour, especially at the section on Carson's medical career. It was also the first time Carson had seen it, Spicer said. Bunch also recalls Trump being enthusiastic about the exhibition of Carson's career, as well as a display of Muhammad Ali. The president and I shared our stories about Ali and what he meant to America, Bunch writes. And, that seems like a good place for finding some common ground. I mean, you're not going to awaken this president to the realities. So, that's as good a thing as any. That would have been the best you could hope for, but I suppose you must have been disappointed about the thing about the Dutch. Later that day, Bunch writes, Trump took to social media describing the museum and Bunch as amazing. I will take what victories I can get, he writes. Asked about the passage, which was written last year, Bunch said he was pleased that Trump had visited. There is no doubt in my mind that there were things he learned, engaged with, he said in an interview last week. What I hope is that the Smithsonian can play that role in a time of partisanship and division. I'm not saying who caused it. Oh, come to us for that, we'll tell you. But the reality is, it's a different time. And so I just want us to play that role. That is a very careful statement. In the book, Bunch also holds Trump partially responsible for the nation's racial divisions. His administration's combative relationship with many in the African American community, that is to say, the African American community, from his feuding with Congressman John Lewis to the attacks on professional athletes, the overwhelming number of those singled out for critical tweets were African American, to his refusal to criticize the white supremacists whose rioting in Charlottesville, Virginia led to the death of Heather Heyer, have deepened the racial divide, Bunch writes. Many visitors have told me that since the election in 2016, the museum has gained even greater significance, he continues. To some, visiting the museum allows them to find the solace, inspiration, and hope that the current poisonous political partisanship and racial antipathy will one day be overcome. Phew. A lot packed into that one, but I thought a very interesting observation, and now I guess we start the clock on how long he remains Smithsonian secretary. Okay. Man. Well, we'll see where that lands, and whether or not anyone tries to replace him, or whether the president lets this one slide for the moment. All right, let's see. You know what? Here's an interesting bent for a few stories here. This one, Brian Monroe sent me a couple of days ago. Oh, look, and it's even labeled here in this tweet. This might be something to talk about on Tuesday. And lo, it was Tuesday. Although it is also sent labeled for me and for Greg, Dem from Connecticut. And Greg doesn't talk about anything with us on Tuesdays. So I'll cover it because it's meant for a Tuesday. This is interesting. Gizmodo is the source here, and the tweet is embedded here. Let me just grab the story. Oh, this is going to take us some time here, huh? What's happening? Why isn't it opening immediately? There we go. I'll close out this failed attempt at opening it. The plan to use Fitbit data to stop mass shootings is one of the scariest proposals yet. Well, scarier than being shot in a mass shooting? No, but scary for good reason, and I'm sure it's good, because why else would it be here in this awesome thing? Okay, moving on here. Melanie Ehrenkranz is my best guess at the writer's name here. The plan to use Fitbit data to stop mass shootings, one of the scariest proposals yet. Now, the next scariest thing is this picture of leathery-faced Donald Trump. But skipping past that, the story itself says, in the aftermath of yet another mass shooting in America, and this was before the latest Texas one, loved ones grieve, gun control advocates call for common sense reforms, and politicians suggest new solutions, quote unquote, that won't do anything about guns. Yes, there is a Republican congressman bouncing around out there, furiously denying that there's anything that can be done about guns except pray for better stuff to happen, essentially. And, that seems like an awfully dumb and irresponsible approach to anything, but leave it to them to put that out there. Okay, so politicians suggest new solutions that won't do anything about guns. That's one of them. These proposals frequently focus on mental health, and in a way, honestly, just saying that everything ought to be prayed about does focus on mental health in some fashion. But a new plan before the White House to monitor neurobehavioral predictors of violence isn't just misguided, it's terrifyingly dystopian. That calls for horror. Right, that's the dystopian part of us. It's not just merely dramatic music, it's horror dramatic. Last week, the Washington Post reported that, this would have come to us last week, so even 2 weeks ago even. The Washington Post reported that the White House had been briefed on a plan to create an agency called HARPA, a healthcare counterpart to the Pentagon's research and development arm, DARPA, which is always kind of a scary thing for us. Among other initiatives, this new agency would reportedly collect volunteer data from a suite of smart devices, including Apple Watches, I don't have one, Fitbits, haven't got that either, Amazon Echoes, no, and Google Homes, no, although, I may change some of that in the near future for the interest of the show, you see. But okay, all these smart devices, these would, if they could collect volunteer data, this would be used in order to identify, quote, neurobehavioral signs, unquote, of someone headed toward a violent, explosive act. That is interesting. Now, I guess if your Amazon Echo or Google Home thing caught you on, it's your own fault, but if it catches you and records you saying, I can't wait to, let's say, go and perpetrate thus and such a mass trauma event, then I could see what they're talking about here. But how does a Fitbit and Apple Watch do it? I don't know if it's all just they all have microphones, or are they saying, 9 out of 10 mass shooters have a heart rate of 136 beats per minute within 10 minutes of... I don't know where they're going with this. Never put anything past DARPA, I guess, or in this case, HARPA. Okay, so the project would then use artificial intelligence to create a sensor suite to flag mental changes that make violence more likely. How they would be able to distinguish between certain kinds of violence, I don't know, but I don't have the AI algorithm before me, and I couldn't tell you what it was anyway, even if I did. According to the Post, the HARPA proposal was discussed with senior White House officials as early as June of 2017, but has, quote, gained momentum after the mass shootings in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. No word on what the mass shootings in Midland and Odessa have done to this. But remember, this is the administration that was also thinking about nuking hurricanes. So if you think this is too stupid for contemplation, I have news for you. The latest version of the plan, reportedly submitted to the Trump administration this month, outlined the biometric project called Safe Home. Okay. An acronym, oh no, you're kidding me. It's an acronym. Stopping Aberrant Fatal Events, SAFE, by, leaving out the B, helping overcome mental extremes. At least they didn't try to make it illness, right? Safe Homey. Stopping aberrant, okay. Helping overcome mental extremes. Well, it's English. I can give them that. Anyway, a source told the newspaper that every time HARPA has been discussed in the White House, quote, even up to the presidential level, it's been very well received. I like it. intelligent computers reading everybody's brains. A copy of the plan obtained by the Post characterizes HARPA as pursuing breakthrough technologies with high specificity and sensitivity for early diagnosis of neuropsychiatric violence. Do you think that's something that can really be done? Think about it for 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the potential nightmare of HARPA. Not Harpo, but HARPA. Where we left off was, of course, the plan obtained by the Post characterizes HARPA as pursuing, quote, breakthrough technologies with high specificity and sensitivity for early diagnosis of neuropsychiatric violence. And claims that, quote, a multimodality solution, sounds very buzzwordy, a multimodality solution along with real-time data analytics is needed to achieve such an accurate diagnosis. Well, it would, of course, in order for an accurate diagnosis to be made, I assume that, yes, you would need high specificity, high sensitivity, multimodality, obviously you would have to have that, and real-time data analytics in order to achieve an accurate one. But are they by themselves sufficient to make such a diagnosis? No. That's the problem. That's a lot of vague buzzwords. Yes, that's true. But the general idea is clear. Collect a wealth of personal data in order to flag mental status changes in individuals and determine whether those changes can predict mass violence. I don't know. It can't, maybe it can, but it's probably not a great idea for various other reasons. But it's a dangerous thing to play with if you don't know. I can at least tell you that. Mike Musson has this comment to add here. Nothing makes violent and paranoid potential mass murderers more comfortable than widespread governmental surveillance. That's true. That is a problem. But, so what? That's it. Bomb hurricanes. There's a lot of problems attached to that. I know, but I love it. So, here's we go. That's a lot of vague buzzwords, but the general idea is clear. Collect a wealth of personal data in order to flag mental status changes in individuals and determine whether those changes can predict mass violence. And if they can, yay. And if they can't, well, I don't know. It's an approach that strikes George David Annas, I guess Annas, Deputy Director of the Forensic Psychiatry Fellowship Program at SUNY Upstate Medical University, not Upstairs Medical College, but Upstate Medical University, as ridiculous. Damn, I thought they were onto something. The proposed data collection goes beyond absurdity when they mention the desire to collect Fitbit data. Annas told Gizmodo. Okay, said the owl to the pussycat. Said the Annas to the Gizmodo. It's absurd. Okay, I am unaware of any study linking walking too much and committing mass murder. Well, that That's too much walking in between your gunshots. If you're firing a weapon that many times and not standing still at a firing range, that is indicative of a problem. So I don't know. I don't know how crazy it really is. But all right. I am unaware of any study linking walking too much, and that's an oversimplification, of course, of what Fitbit data can tell you. But all right. As for the other technologies, what are these people expecting? Alexa, tell me the best way to kill a lot of people really quickly. Really? Well, you know, I think that they are expecting, God damn it, this is the last straw. I'm going to go and get my well-outfitted AR-15 and attach the 100 round drums and take a couple extra of them and take up a sniper's perch that I have built for myself in this particular clock tower and take out my grievances on the world. Say something like that into a microphone. I have just done that, of course, and broadcast it intentionally, knowing. But the point is, you should also have, if your Fitbit also says you have a high heart rate at the time, then you'll say, that's the flag we're looking for. I mean, there's a germ of an idea in there. It's just probably not one worth developing. Less unusual is the effort to scapegoat people with mental health issues by suggesting their illness is a leading factor in these atrocities, even though that conclusion isn't supported by data. Creating a watch list of citizens who most likely will never act violently based on their mental health is a very dangerous proposal with major ethical considerations. Emma Friedel, a doctoral candidate at Northeastern University specializing in mass murder, told Gizmodo in an email. I know. Doing so to predict the unpredictable is utterly absurd. I didn't realize that they had a degree program in mass murder, but that's Northeastern University for you. I don't think that's what they meant by that, but how else are you going to put it? That's her specialty. And that's why we're talking to a doctoral candidate instead of a doctor. No doctors specialize in mass murder, only candidates. Friedel said that literally any risk factor identified for mass shooters will result in millions of false positives, adding that the most reliable risk factor is gender, and that most mass murderers are male. Should we create a list of all men in the United States and keep tabs on them? Why not? She said. Well, she didn't say why not. I did. Although it would be absurd and highly unethical, doing so would be more effective than keeping a list of persons with mental illness. Anas expressed a similar sentiment. He pointed out that few mass shooters were diagnosed with mental illness beforehand, attaching an FBI fact sheet that includes data on mental illness and active shootings. Many of the recent mass murders have been perpetrated by white supremacists with clear motives in this regard, Anas said. Racism is not a mental illness. Well, that's a debate others can have, because it's not in this article, so I can't have it for you. The point isn't that the government should be surveilling other demographic groups instead, but rather how alarming and unfounded the push to monitor people with mental illnesses is, or really, in fact, monitoring anybody in particular, except those who've exhibited clear indications of violent racist behavior, I guess. Advocating for mental health reform in the wake of a mass shooting without explaining why is almost as much of a non sequitur as advocating for the improvement of infrastructure after such an event. That's true. Maybe it was road rage and better roads or intermodal transportation options would have prevented all of this. And of course, as people have spent the better part of this weekend and every weekend for years explaining, lots of countries have people with mental illnesses, or for that matter, people with high heart rates and Fitbits, but nobody experiences our rate of mass shootings. I wonder what it could be. And it isn't just Republicans, by the way, considering such proposals. In case you wanted to get mad at some Democrats, how about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo? Easy to do, right? He responded to the Ohio and Texas mass shootings with a list of efforts Democratic candidates for president should endorse to improve gun safety, and these included, I'm sure there were some other better ones, but these included surveilling people with mental health issues, proposing the creation of a federal mental health database that would restrict access to guns for those on it. New York has already begun to compile such a list, which requires mental health workers to report any patient who appears likely to harm themselves or others, seemingly at any point in the future. That might need some refining. Aside from assuming a strong link between mental illness and violence, this kind of surveillance creates mistrust in the system, forcing people with mental health issues to consider whether getting help could put them on a federal watch list. The only thing it would be likely to do is to further marginalize an already maligned minority who already deal with stigma, Anas told Gizmodo, and further discourage others from seeking care they might otherwise have sought out. Jonathan Metzl, director of the Center for Medicine, Health, and Society at Vanderbilt University, listed other negative consequences that could occur if such a database were disseminated, including making it more difficult to get on an airplane or get a loan. There are real-world implications if that knowledge gets out, he said. In the absence of gun reform, these political obsessions with surveillance through healthcare are a disservice to gun safety conversations and a disservice to a marginalized community. You could put a microchip in every person diagnosed with mental illness in this country, and it would still do nothing to reduce mass shootings, Metzl said, if it wasn't also accompanied by common sense gun laws. Okay, also an angle to think about. Now, when I said that there was the possibility of an entire theme here, what I meant was that there were other articles I had seen in the recent past which might bear on some of this. One was here in Vox. Let's see if I can get this one open here, by Seagull Samuel. Brain reading tech is coming. The law is not ready to protect us in the age of neurocapitalism. This is not monitoring people for mental health extremes prior to mass shootings, but something entirely different. But I guess they could work off the same technology. In the era of neurocapitalism, it says, your brain needs new rights. Really, you do, but maybe you are your brain. That's one way of thinking about who you are and what you do. Nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. That's a quote from George Orwell's dystopian novel, 1984, published in 1949. The comment is meant to highlight, in case you didn't cover this in class, what a repressive surveillance state the characters live in. But looked at another way, it shows how lucky they are. I didn't take that class. It shows how lucky they are. At least their brains are still private. That could be happening this year in class, I suppose. Over the past few weeks, Facebook, again, at the center of everything, and Elon Musk, also at the center of everything terrible, Elon Musk's Neuralink, have announced that they're building tech to read your mind, literally. Mark Zuckerberg's company is funding research on brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. They have their own acronym now. That can, or I guess it's not an acronym, it's just an abbreviation. Everything's got an abbreviation. BCIs can pick up thoughts directly from your neurons and translate them into words. So just see what that does to the pop-up ads. We're really in trouble. I didn't even know they had such a product. The researchers say they've already built an algorithm, oh boy, that can decode words from brain activity in real time. I bet the word is going to be boobs a lot. And not for everyone, but let's say a friend of mine might have that problem. Though I have other friends for whom other parts could become a problem. And you get the idea. So if they can read your brain, I can translate that into words. And honestly, you know what? I have that algorithm written. Just give me the $1 billion now. I bet I could pull this off, right? I mean, 9 times out of 10, right? You'll be correct. Just pull people off the street and put the rig on their head. Take the, the spaghetti colander that they put on Rick Moranis' head in Ghostbusters, right? And hook him up to a computer. And if you say, hey, he's thinking about sex, right? He'll be like, I wasn't. I was thinking about, golf or archery. I don't know. No, you weren't. Everyone will believe you were thinking about sex and you were just embarrassed to say so, and everyone will hail this fantastic technology. Look, I'm going to put it on a bunch of people, and they're all thinking about sex. One of them will be thinking about food. And everyone will say, that's believable enough for me. They'll deny it. People will say that wasn't what I was thinking of. I was deliberately not thinking of it to test your equipment. Yeah, the equipment knows you better than you know yourself, and that would pass muster, I think. I'd get millions of dollars. Elon Musk has 10 companies for which there's no product whatsoever, and he's a billionaire, right? I think he sold some cars. That has worked out. Why can't that happen for me? Why can't I have that? And Theranos, what's her name? I don't know. Does she have no more money left? For a while, she was a billionaire. I wouldn't mind being a billionaire for a while. I need to be a billionaire for the next couple of years. And then if it all goes away, that's fine. I got to pay for college and probably some elder care issues coming up as well. And probably some for me, too. And who knows what is in my healthcare future. 10 years of being a billionaire and then lose it all. I think it will be okay. No one ever loses it all anyway. But can't I just fake it? If Theranos can, I can too. Anyway, it's too late for me. I'm not already rich, and that's how you're supposed to do it. Mark Zuckerberg's company is funding research on brain-computer interfaces, right? Musk's company has created, this is weird, flexible, quote, threads. Like, does that make it flexible? That means are we talking about literally flexible, physically flexible thread that can be implanted into a brain? Ew. And one day could allow you to control your smartphone or computer with just your thoughts. Musk wants to start testing in humans by the end of next year. The consequences be damned. Yeah. So, look, it's a clinical success. I implanted one of my flexible threads into his brain, and he immediately tried to dial 911 and said, I've just been murdered by Elon Musk. But he couldn't actually complete the call. But the point is, yes, it's true. The idea was that with just my thoughts, the dialing would happen. But we're in a beta stage. And I put the thing in there, and he had the thought to dial. And what it did was it controlled some what I'll call wetware out there. And the so-called hands quote unquote attached to his body by arms and connected with so-called nerves to the brain host where my flexible thread was, did the dialing, but that's just because we're in beta. Eventually, you'll be able to do it without your hands, like by saying, hey Siri, call 911. I thank God I have my Siri turned off here on my phone because it would have just done that. But luckily I have that thing turned off, quote unquote. It's not something, maybe Safe Home is monitoring me regardless. But, eventually you'll be able to do that way. But that's just using Siri. Yes, I know, but that's our next phase. The point is he did it without his hands. Eventually you'll just be able to think that and the thing will do it. Yes, eventually that will happen. But in the meantime, 900 people die because I stick wires in their brains, and no one calls it murder. It's innovation. I'm thinking outside the box. I'm putting part of the box in your brain, and you're supposed to then think about boxes or about how to get outside of one in the minute and a half you have before you are paralyzed and die. But what an innovator I am. Anyway, other companies such as Kernel, that's Kernel, I guess in case you want to invest. What am I giving you? All right. Emotive, forget it. They're all spelled dumb because they're companies. Companies are Kernel, Emotive, and Neuroski. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Neurosky, I guess. But it looks like a surname, and we've been talking about Poland. Neuroski. That's pretty good. Neurosky, I guess. Maybe like from Skynet. That's even worse. Neurosky. If they capitalize that S, I won't make that mistake. Anyway, they're all working on brain tech, which I think I really need to work on as well. Neuroski. They say they're building it for ethical purposes. That's good news. Like helping people with paralysis control their devices. That would be helpful. That is an ethical purpose. The other ones aren't. This might sound like science fiction, but it's already begun to change people's lives. I've already changed mine by coming up with the name of Neurosky. Over the past dozen years, a number of paralyzed patients have received brain implants that allow them to move a computer cursor or control robotic arms. Implants that can read thoughts are still years away from commercial availability, but research in the field is moving faster than most people realize. Your brain, the final privacy frontier, may not be private much longer. Some neuroethicists argue that the potential for misuse of these technologies is so great. How great is it? It's so great that we need revamped human rights laws, a new jurisprudence of the mind, to protect us. The technologies have the potential to interfere with rights that are so basic that we may not even think of them as rights, like our ability to determine where ourselves end and machines begin. I hadn't thought of that one. True. Our current laws are not equipped to address this. Let's discuss them. 4 new rights we may need enshrined in law. Several countries are already pondering how to handle neuro rights. In Chile, 2 bills that would make brain data protection a human right will come before Parliament for a vote in November, thanks in part to the advocacy of neuroscientist Raphael Yuste, Y-U-S-T-E. In Europe, the OECD is expected this year to release a new set of principles for regulating the use of brain data. They are well ahead of things there. And imagine that. I wouldn't have guessed that Chile would have been the hotbed for that, but I guess that's where Raphael Yuste lives. So start at home, Raphael. Good job. One of the main people pushing for these new human rights is neuroethicist Marcelo Ienca, I-E-N-C-A, a researcher at ETH Zurich, one of Europe's top science and technology universities. In 2017, he released a paper outlining 4 specific rights for the neurotechnology age he believes we should enshrine in law. I reached out to ask what he thought of the recent revelations from Facebook and Neuralink. Now, he wouldn't have had to reach out to ask for those thoughts if you could just stick a thread in his brain, but then he might have died instead. So good for you for relying on old school technology. I'm very concerned about the commercialization of brain data in the consumer market, he said. And I'm not talking about a far-fetched future. We already have consumer neurotech with people trading their brain data for services from private companies. He mentioned neurogaming, where you control your movements in a video game using your brain activity rather than a traditional controller, and self-tracking, where you use wearable devices to, say, monitor your sleep. I'm tempted to call it neurocapitalism. And we'll see why, I guess, a little bit later. It's an interesting idea. BCI tech includes systems that, quote, read neural activity to decode what it's already saying, often with the help of AI processing software, and systems that write to the brain, giving it new inputs to actually change how it's functioning. Some systems do both. When I asked Ienca to explain each of the 4 human rights he believes we need and give a concrete example of how neurotechnology might violate it, he came up with some frightening scenarios. Let's get to those. Some of them already underway. 1, the right to cognitive liberty. You should have the right to freely decide you want to use a given neurotechnology or refuse it. Wow. There are places where you wouldn't have it, I guess. In China, the government is already mining data from some employees' brains by having them wear caps that scan brainwaves for depression, anxiety, rage, or fatigue. If your employer wants you to wear an EEG headset, and you don't work for Scientologists, to monitor your attention levels, that might qualify as a violation of the cognitive liberty principle, Ienca said, because even if you're told that wearing the device is optional, you'll probably feel implicit pressure to do so since you don't want to be at a competitive disadvantage. He added that the U.S. military is also looking into neurotechnologies to make soldiers more fit for duty. Down the line, that could include ways to make them less empathetic and more belligerent. Soldiers may be pressured to accept interventions. There is already military-funded research to see if we can monitor decreases in attention levels and concentration with hybrid BCIs that can read deficits in attention levels and write to the brain to increase alertness through neuromodulation. There are DARPA-funded projects that attempted to do so, Ayanka says, referring to you know about DARPA. We were just talking about DARPA and HARPA in the last article. The second one, the right to mental privacy. You should have the right to seclude your brain data or to publicly share it. Ayanka emphasized that neurotechnology has huge implications for law enforcement and government surveillance, as we just spoke about a minute ago. If brain-reading devices have the ability to read the content of thoughts, he said, we're not there yet, right? In the years to come, governments will be interested in using this tech for interrogations and investigations, I guess pre-crime as well. The right to remain silent and the principle against self-incrimination enshrined in the U.S. Constitution could become meaningless in a world where the authorities are empowered to eavesdrop on your mental state without your consent. That's true. It's a scenario reminiscent of the sci-fi movie Minority Report, in which a special police unit called the Pre-Crime Division identifies and arrests murderers before they commit their crimes. Number 3, very quickly, if we can, the right to mental integrity. You should have the right to not be harmed physically or psychologically, by neurotechnology. BCIs equipped with a right function can enable new forms of brainwashing, theoretically enabling all sorts of people to exert control over our minds. Religious authorities who want to indoctrinate people, political regimes that want to squash dissent, terrorist groups seeking new recruits. What's more, devices like these being built by Facebook and Neuralink may be vulnerable to hacking. Yeah. What happens if you're using one of them and a malicious actor intercepts the Bluetooth signal, increasing or decreasing the voltage of the current that goes to your brain, thus making you more depressed, say, or more compliant, or just electrocuted, I guess. Neuroethicists refer to this as brain jacking. They've already got a word for it. This is still hypothetical, but the possibility has been demonstrated in proof of concept studies. Why? Ayanka said, adding, a hack like this wouldn't require that much technological sophistication. And number 4, the right to psychological continuity. You should have the right to be protected from alterations of your sense of self that you did not authorize. Damn, I should hope so. In one study, an epileptic woman who'd been given a BCI came to feel such a radical symbiosis with it that, she said, it became me. Then the company that implanted the device in her brain, if it's implanted, it did become you, went bankrupt, and she was forced to have it removed. She cried, saying, I lost myself. Oh, that's one I hadn't thought of. Ayanka said, that's an example of how psychological continuity can be disrupted not only by the imposition of a neurotechnology, but also by its removal. This is a scenario in which a company is basically owning our sense of self, he said. Another threat to psychological continuity comes from the nascent field of neuromarketing, where advertisers try to figure out, this is where I was thinking, try to figure out how the brain makes purchasing decisions and how to nudge those decisions along. The nudges operate below the level of conscious awareness, so these non-invasive neural interventions can happen without us even knowing it. One day, a neuromarketing company is testing a subliminal technique. The next, you might find yourself preferring product A over product B without being quite sure why. Consumer advocate organizations have raised the alarm about neuromarketing. Jeff Chester, the executive director of the Center for Digital Democracy, has said that adult advertising should be regulated. Adult advertising, should be regulated if the advertising is now purposely designed to bypass those rational defenses that formerly allowed us to discern what's true and untrue. There's just a little bit more, and I'll get to the gist of it here. Brain data is the ultimate refuge of privacy. The last section is entitled, Given the worries about neurocapitalism, I asked Ayanka whether neurotechnology should be taken out of the control of private companies and reclassified as public goods. He said yes, both to prevent companies from inflicting harm and to prevent them from affording benefits only to rich people who can pay for their products. That's what I came to think of about the bankruptcy depriving the epileptic woman of her implant there. And a new company has bought the provider you used to have, the product that made your life possible, and they're coming to repossess it or charge you a monthly fee for it, rental, instead of a one-time fee, right? How interesting is all that? Well, there's a little bit more here, but I can't get it all in there, but you're encouraged to take a look at the Afternoon Post summarizing the show and get the exciting conclusion of this Vox piece. Now, though, you're invited to stick with us for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for the exciting introductions and conclusions of several stories, including, look at this. Conan O'Brien detailed his visit to Greenland after Donald Trump said he wanted to buy it.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Lots more, of course. Trump spent Labor Day attacking workers, Social Security, and the government itself. The Harvard freshman from Lebanon, who was previously denied entry into the United States because of his friend's social media posts, arrived on campus in time for his first classes. That's good news. And a mysterious kidney disease may be the first pandemic caused by climate change.